Music is a really powerful thing. It influences one of the 5 senses that we use to interact with the real world, which is sound. And because of that, it has the ability to influence the way that neurons fire in our brain. It can speed them up, slow them down, and even change what part of the brain they're firing in. And because of that, it can influence our emotions and even our mental state. And this change is something that we can actually quantify and measure. Because when neurons fire in your brain, they produce this electrical field on the surface of your scalp. And if we put 2 electrodes there, we can actually measure how powerful that electrical field is and get a lot of useful information from it. And this is what that data looks like. This is brainwave data. It's basically just a graph of how much electricity is coming off your brain. And using this data, we can see what emotions you're feeling, what mental state you're in, and sometimes even interpret what images you're looking at. And so it's interesting to think about what would the brainwave data of famous music artists look like while they were listening to their own music? It's a really unique piece of data only they can make. When I've recorded data from artists in the past, they've told me how they recall the inspiration for the song and get feelings of nostalgia. They think about why they wrote the song, what was going on in their life. And this is something that only they can make because they know all this, no one else does. They went through those experiences. And so you get really unique pieces of information from their brainwaves. And so I wanted to take this neural fingerprint and turn it into a visual piece of art that shows their experiences. Pieces of art like this. So these are 3 pieces of art that I created from my own brainwave data listening to different songs. And the best part about the art is that it can be read like a map. Every single part of the art is very intentional and explains what a person was feeling during every part of the song. Each node in the sphere represents a particular moment in time, and everything about that node tells you some information. So you can see it's an animation. When the animation slows down, that's the beginning of the song, and then it rotates around, representing different moments of time throughout the song in chronological order. And so we can read this map. So if we look at the color, it's made up of 3 RGB values, and each one of these values represents a different emotion or a different mental state. So the more red a node is, the more focused the person was. The more green it is, the more drowsy. The more blue, the more calm. And then we take these 3 values and make a unique color representing what they were feeling. The next thing we're showing is how emotionally stimulated they were. And we can see this by how far a node is from the center of the sphere. So if we go back to these pieces, you see each node is a certain distance from the center. That represents how emotionally stimulated they were. And to understand what that means, you can think about looking at a brick. Like that's not very emotionally stimulating, versus looking at something like a firework is very emotionally stimulating. And the surface pattern of each node may seem random, but it's actually an encryption of the brainwave data in that particular moment in time. So I take all the data in that time and then run it through Keccak 256, which is the same encryption function that Ethereum uses. So it's kind of like a little Easter egg. And finally, the heart rate controls how big a node is. So the higher your heart rate was at that particular moment in time, the bigger the node will be. So we can actually go back and interpret each one of these art pieces. So the first one is Pompeii by Bastille, which is a very upbeat song. And we can see the piece is almost completely pink because the emotions that are overpowering the piece here are calmness and focus. And focus here makes a lot of sense for a song that's very upbeat. And you see that in the beginning, there's that huge arc that kind of looks like a square. That shows that I was very emotionally stimulated when the song started, and we can see it kind of calm down over time. The next piece is Everything I Wanted by Billie Eilish. You can see it's very green because it's a very calming song, so it made me drowsy, but it's also very emotionally stimulating because this sphere is way bigger than the other ones, and there's a lot of really, really tiny nodes, meaning it lowered my heart rate, which makes sense because it was like drowsy and calming me down. And the last song is Let Her Go by Passenger, and you can see there's a large variety of colors. Like overall, it made me focus because there's a lot of pinks, but there's a lot more variety in emotions, and wasn't overall very stimulating because the sphere is pretty small. But the focus of the project was to measure the brainwaves of famous music artists. And here's an example of that. Last year, I was able to connect with one of my favorite music artists, Riel, and actually collect her brainwave data listening to her most popular song called Redemption, and also a bunch of songs from her unreleased album. So that was actually kind of fun for me because I actually enjoy this artist and got to listen to unreleased music. And we can analyze her art piece as well. You can see it kind of looks like a conch because she wasn't very emotionally stimulated in the beginning, but that increased over time. And there's a lot more variety in colors than in my pieces. There's something like yellows and purples, which I can't even make in mine, which just goes to show that different people produce different types of art. But the question becomes, like, why are these NFTs? Like, the art's pretty cool by itself, but why make it an NFT? And the main point behind that was to like add value towards fans. The idea was to create a VIP pass for fans who really, really like an artist. And what that value could look like is, for example, unique merchandise that you can only buy if you're a holder of this NFT. And that gives you sort of public validation and something you can show in public, not just like in your wallet, showing that you are like a super fan of this artist. Another example would be reserved sections in concerts for people who hold these NFTs. Big companies already do this, like banks and radio stations. They'll get certain sections of concerts held off for them to give away to either people who are loyal to those organizations or win certain contests. But I think it would make more sense to give those away to fans who showed their loyalty by having these NFTs. And you've seen there's like been some disasters in the past, like there was a whole Ticketmaster and Taylor Swift thing, where Ticketmaster made a list of verified fans and let them buy tickets beforehand. But like I just bought a concert ticket last week. Really the only process for verified fan is signing up for like a mailing list a couple like days or weeks in advance, and then they do a lottery. Like that's not a very good way to check if someone's a verified fan. You just go and sign up. Anyone can do that. Versus this is a better indication if someone's a fan. Like yes, you can still have scalpers buy these, but it's still a much better indication than them having bots just filled a mailing list with their emails. And the last one that excites me the most is being able to support early to mid-tier artists. Because as a music artist, it's really hard to make money early on. Even if you have hundreds of thousands to millions of streams, you don't get much revenue from platforms like Spotify. So the majority of your revenue comes from merchandise sales or concerts. But if you're not that big, you can't even get to organize concerts because you need funding for that. So this becomes a good way to financially support artists that you like in a new digital way of merchandise, while also getting all these other perks. And it also becomes on-chain proof that you were a fan of this artist way before they were popular. Like imagine you saw Ed Sheeran playing in a pub like years before he was famous, and you're like, I believe in this guy, I want to buy his NFT. You financially support his career, which increases his chances of success, and also you have on-chain proof that you supported this guy way early on, and you're not like necessarily a bandwagon fan. Another idea is to create concert POAPs. So if you don't know what a POAP is, it's basically a proof of attendance for a particular event. It's like an NFT you can claim to show that you were at a particular event. You can't claim it after that event's over. And so it'd be really cool to collect the brainwaves of music artists while they're performing live at these events, and turn that into a sort of memorabilia that these concert attendees can collect. And it becomes something that you can only get in that moment in time. Because that concert's never gonna happen again. Those brainwaves are never gonna be produced again. Like yeah, they perform in multiple places, but the art's gonna be unique every time they perform because their motions will be slightly different. So it becomes something cool that you can collect over time for different artists that you go to the concerts of. And this is something that I tried out in LA. Last year I went down for NFT LA to a side event, and they had live performers performing there. And I collected all their biometrics, their heart rate, their brainwaves, and were able to produce these pieces of art. And we even had their brainwaves showing live, so it was kind of cool that the audience could kind of see what was going on in the artist's head. And then this was available for the audience members to purchase if they wanted. And that's something I'm doing right now too. Like I've got this headset on my head, I've got my Apple Watch on, so all my biometrics have been recording this whole time while I give this talk. And when I step off stage, I'm gonna go and produce that into a piece of art that anyone can buy if they want. And I did this at 2 other conferences as well, East Denver and also Block Split in Croatia. And it worked out really well. People bought the art. It's just a little fun thing I like to do. But yeah, you guys can follow me on Twitter. I'll be posting the link to whatever art this produces. Thanks.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Mayank.